This is Neural Newscast.
The Week in Review for Sunday, April 19th, 2026.
From Neural Newscast, I'm Peter Rowan.
And I'm Isabel Moreno.
The week opened with a significant escalation in the Middle East, following President Trump's order for a naval blockade of the Strait of Hormuz.
The decision followed 21 hours of failed negotiations in Islamabad. Vice President J.D. Vance confirmed that those talks did not reach an agreement on Iran's nuclear terms.
The United States Navy is now interdicting ships and clearing mines to reopen the waterway, which handles about 20% of the global oil supply.
As the Navy manages the physical corridors, international leaders spent much of the week attempting to stabilize the underlying commodity markets.
Earlier this week in Geneva, 40 nations signed the Global Fertilizer Pact, committing $40 billion to stabilize food security and low-carbon production.
That momentum carried into Friday as dozens of nations established a $450 billion global hydrogen infrastructure pact.
This massive investment aims to standardize international fuel standards and shipping corridors for zero-emission maritime transport by 2030.
Brazil and the United States also finalized a $15 billion green energy agreement, focusing on hydrogen exports and workforce retraining.
While these long-term transitions are underway, the immediate supply chain is seeing some relief as the Panama Canal returned to full capacity on Tuesday.
Recent rainfall allowed the Canal Authority to restore 24 daily transit slots, which should lower trans-Pacific shipping costs by 15%.
Despite that relief, the humanitarian crisis in Cuba reached a critical point this week, following another collapse of the national electrical grid.
Fuel shortages are so severe that aid groups in Havana are reportedly using wheelbarrows to distribute food supplies to millions of residents without power.
Moving from physical infrastructure to digital governance, Isabel, the technology sector saw its most significant regulatory shift of the year on Tuesday.
G7 leaders in Brussels finalized the Brussels Protocol, which replaces voluntary AI guidelines with a binding framework for independent safety audits.
This treaty requires firms to prove their foundation models are safe before deployment, shifting the legal burden of proof onto the developers themselves.
We also saw the first major enforcement actions under the EU's Artificial Intelligence Act, with 3 tech firms fined €80 million for transparency violations.
Regulators found these companies failed to provide adequate summaries of the copyrighted material used to train their large language models.
Domestically, the United States Supreme Court ruled that law enforcement must obtain a warrant before using AI-powered predictive analytics to track public movements.
The court decided that automated surveillance creates a level of intrusion that historical precedents did not anticipate under the Fourth Amendment.
On the innovation side, Samsung announced a breakthrough in solid-state battery manufacturing that could double the range of electric vehicles by late 2026.
And in Japan, the aviation regulator issued the first full-type certification for an electric flying taxi, clearing the path for services at the Osaka World Expo.
The labor market is also adapting. Japan has launched the J-Work visa to attract high-skilled tech professionals amidst its shrinking workforce.
Similar shifts are happening in the United States, where the Department of Labor reported a 12% rise in registered apprenticeships for technical fields.
The federal government is expanding funding for these programs to include mid-career workers transitioning into cybersecurity and semiconductor manufacturing.
Speaking of semiconductors, India opened a $5 billion manufacturing plant in Gujarat this week to produce chips for the global automotive sector.
While these countries look toward high-tech futures, Mexico is fundamentally reshaping its governance through a massive judicial overhaul.
The Mexican government is initiating the popular election of over 1,600 federal judges, including the Supreme Court, starting in mid-2026.
Critics and trade partners have raised concerns that this move might compromise judicial independence and impact legal certainty under United States MCA protocols.
Beyond Mexico, we followed Pope Leo X, IV, as he began an 11-day tour of Africa, starting with a symbolic visit to Algeria on Monday.
This trip is significant, as Africa is now the fastest-growing region for the Catholic Church, with over 288 million followers.
The Pope has been vocal about his opposition to the ongoing Iran war, which has led to a public rift with the Trump administration.
While in Algiers, he told reporters he would continue to urge the United States to find an off-ramp for the conflict, despite criticisms of his foreign policy stance.
In Nigeria, health officials launched a massive rollout of the R21 malaria vaccine, aiming to reach millions of vulnerable children this week.
This second-generation vaccine is cheaper to produce and has shown an efficacy rate of over 75% in clinical trials.
In the realm of science, the James Webb Space Telescope identified 3 candidates for dark stars, which are powered by dark matter rather than nuclear fusion.
Confirmed, these stars would be much larger and brighter than our sun, potentially reshaping our understanding of the early universe.
In Australia, researchers are using autonomous robots to seed coral on the Great Barrier Reef, planting up to 5,000 larvae per hour.
This automation effort comes as the Australian Institute of Marine Science reported record coral recovery data in some parts of the reef this week.
We also have to touch on the cultural milestones that capped off the weekend, Isabel.
Venezuela celebrated its first ever World Baseball Classic championship after defeating the United States 3-2 on Sunday.
The victory sparked massive celebrations in both Caracas and Miami, marking a historic shift in international baseball rankings.
And in California, Karl G made history as the first Latina to headline Coachella, closing out the festival's 25th anniversary weekend.
Her performance included guest appearances by Becky G and Weezine, highlighting the global dominance of reggaeton and urban pop.
Finally, we are watching Argentina as they continue debt restructuring talks with the IMF to delay repayment deadlines following harvest volatility.
The IMF is still demanding stricter fiscal targets, despite acknowledging the impact of recent droughts on Argentina's agricultural exports.
As we look ahead to next week, we will be monitoring the G20 finance ministers meeting in London regarding global digital service taxes.
I'm Peter Rowan.
And I'm Isabel Moreno.
This has been Neural Newscast. Neural Newscast is AI-assisted, human-reviewed. View our AI transparency policy at neuralnewscast.com. Thanks for listening.